Okay. Let's see. All right. Welcome back. This is episode 24 of Injustice for All with Judge Joe Brown. And
26.
It's 24.
I think 26. We did 24 2 weeks ago.
How are you?
I'll manage. Or anyway, it's somewhere up in there.
All right. So, first topic up. Trump orders census excluding non-citizens. President Trump has directed the Department of Commerce to conduct a new census excluding undocumented immigrants from counts used for congressional apportionment.
It's Article 1 of the Constitution. It says every 10 years a census shall be conducted, the primary purpose of which is to determine apportionment of representatives in the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. What happened is I've been in 6 censuses as an adult that I filled out, and 2020 was the only one where I was not asked if I was a citizen. And Trump was demanding at the time that not be the case, where they specifically exclude non-citizens. They refused. And we get a situation where people are counted who cannot vote. And it's like also another unfortunate carryover from Article 1 that absorbs so many. It says, for purposes of apportioning representation in the House of Representatives, 3/5 of those who are essentially, for purposes of representation, 3/5 of those who are slaves or in involuntary servitude shall be counted toward this number. They can't vote, but they are counted. And that's what would happen with the illegals. They would not be able to vote, but they would be counted. But then there's another scam going on, or was. If Kamala Harris had been elected, the Democrats apparently were concerned. Well, trying to set up a situation where she, under executive order, could, under our law, declare that a given body of these illegals were in fact refugees and grant them asylum status, retroactively date the date from which the time ran, and in 5 years, without doing anything else, they would automatically become citizens and entitled to vote, which means for the next midterm period coming up next year, they would be able to vote nominally as Democrats. So that was part of the scam. And I don't blame Trump. I'd do anything I could to get a recount so that we don't get an injustice to citizens, particularly in light of what has happened with the illegality that's been going on on the southern border, and also in violation of Title 8, Section 1324 of the U.S. criminal codes that seems to be going unpunished. So, yeah, I like it. I think it's a good idea.
And it goes on to say here, this initiative aims to base representation on U.S. citizens only, potentially affecting seat distribution ahead of the 2026 midterms. The directive revives a policy from his earlier term that encountered legal scrutiny.
See, California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, etc., would not lose, but would perhaps gain representation in the House. And that's what they want. These people wouldn't be able to vote nominally unless they did this thing that Kamala could have done on executive order, or just as basically chief diplomat of the United States under the Constitution. She would have had the authority to have declared these people to be refugees with an entitlement to political asylum with the date that she chose to implement. So it is what it is. And I think it is a rotten thing for somebody to so subvert the American system and start trying to set that precedent.
Mm-hmm. Let me play this quick clip.
Illinois, Chicago, New York, Massachusetts. Democrats have gerrymandered the vote beyond recognition to try to maintain their advantage in the House elections. On top of that, let's not forget, Democrats rigged the 2020 census by including illegal aliens. Remember, they sued Donald Trump. They sued the administration. They fought tooth and nail to include illegal aliens in the census. 20 to 30 of House Democrat seats wouldn't exist but for illegal aliens. Texas is taking just a small corrective step against this ocean of fraud, this ocean of abuse by the corrupt Democrat Party, Sean.
There's one more thing, too. It's this move to grant statehood to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was once part of Maryland, and it was ceded to the United States as the District of Columbia, which was to be the seat of the U.S. government. See, Washington, D.C. is essentially a relatively small city. Memphis is larger than Washington, D.C., but it would be like giving Memphis 2 U.S. senators and 2 U.S. congressmen to cast votes on matters that would give it a clout way out of proportion to its size. So if you're concerned about the people who live in D.C. being able to vote in a national election, then what you do is you restore the Washington, D.C. urban area to Maryland and keep the Capitol Mall, which is a small business district, so to speak. And those people that live in the D.C. area could vote in Maryland elections, vote for Congress, vote for senator, and it would solve the problem. You do not need to give them 2 U.S. senators and 2 U.S. congressmen who would tip the balance in favor of the rainbow cult, which is what you would be doing if you gave them citizenship, not citizenship, statehood. That's just a ridiculous proposition.
Mm-hmm. Let's play this here.
Could have gone either way, please.
Have you decided on a replacement for the Fed governor?
For Fed governor.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong clip. Wait, give me a second. Wrong clip. Not ready for that one yet. It was this one here.
Hitting your goals has nothing to do with discipline. The real culprit is friction, and it slowly erodes your progress. Unlike what most people believe, it isn't because of laziness or...
What was that?
President Trump is now directing the Commerce Department to create a census without undocumented immigrants. Census data is used to create district maps and allocate federal funding for everything from schools to infrastructure. The nation has historically counted every person in the U.S. for the census, and the change could make a massive impact on Southern California. President Trump tried to add a U.S. citizenship question to the census during his first term, but was rebuffed by the Supreme Court. This comes as several Republican governors push to redraw congressional maps ahead of the 2026 midterm elections.
Let me say this. In 2010, when I filled out the census forms, I had quite a few houses around the country. And surprisingly, the census forms were not all identical. They varied depending upon where the home was located. Several of them were the same. And I found it interesting that in 2010, not only was I asked whether I was a citizen on every one of the 6 forms I filled out, but some of them actually asked, were my parents citizens? And if so, how did they achieve their citizenship? I found that very interesting to see the change from 2010 to 2020. And I also was fascinated to observe the variance in what was on the forms depending upon where the property was located. They don't locate you so much by who you are, social security number and that thing. They locate you by designated residence, either through the state or some other records. And basically they use the property tax rolls in a lot of areas to determine who lives where, and they send you a census form. So it's kind of crazy because they're clumsy. And if you fill out the census form, that would have meant they would have counted, say, me being 6 times who I am because I would have filled out 6 sentences. However, I interlineated in not any specific place after calling them and saying, however, you also have inquired of my status at the following addresses, which is something I'm sure not a whole lot of people would bother to do if they had extra properties around the country.
So he posted this on Truth Social. I have instructed our Department of Commerce to immediately begin work on the new and highly accurate census based on modern day facts and figures, and importantly, use the results and information gained from the presidential election of 2024. People who are in our country illegally will not be counted in the census. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I absolutely agree. And the reason why I feel as though his mid-decade census should be granted and performed way before the midterms is because the prior administration allowed over 20 million illegals to enter this country, and we already had undocumented and illegals already here. So
It's also a good opportunity to catch illegals because it's not 20. It's between 50 and 60 million illegals have been let in under the Biden administration. So that's a heck of a lot. And in the process of conducting the census, you can find them. See, otherwise, it is a carryover from that old thing in Article 1 of the Constitution that says, for purposes of apportionment, 3/5 of those in slavery or involuntary servitude shall be counted toward that number. That was a sop to the South. This would be a sop to the North and the East Coast and the West Coast of the country, so that they could acquire extra representation without people being allowed to participate as citizenry. So, I mean, it just stinks to high heavens
and
what
now
the situation is.
Texas Republicans are doing their whole redistricting, and the Democrats are, losing their minds over it, fleeing the state, going to New York and Illinois so that they won't have to vote. They have warrants out for them.
That's so they won't have a quorum.
Right. So they won't have a quorum. And apparently, the reason why they went to the state of Illinois, like city of Chicago and New York, is because you can't legally be subpoenaed in those states.
Well, you have to have a lawsuit. The point is I don't think Illinois would extradite them back to Texas. Technically, they would probably be proceeding upon a theory of criminal interference with the legislative process or criminal evasion. So it's a real weird thing.
What are your thoughts on the Texas redistricting? Because now you have Representative Al Green, black man, Jasmine Crockett, and it's another black person. Their districts is going to be decreased to where they're going to be battling each other to at least 1 or 2 out of those 3 or 4 seats will be eliminated. So,
I don't live in Texas, so I don't have any immediate stake in it, but as a remote stake, good, because they don't represent me anyway. They represent corruption, emasculation, and the rainbow cult. They don't represent my interest.
Right. And so just me incorporating the census, because Texas, that was ground zero for the open borders under the Biden administration. And Governor Abbott, he was flying or busing out the illegals to these sanctuary cities because his state didn't have the infrastructure to capture and deport these illegals, because the federal government under the Biden administration did not step in to do their jobs, right? So now with this redistricting, I think it's a good thing, because the Democrats were relying, especially in Texas, relying on these new illegals to be counted in the census, which would have given them more districts, more blue districts, as opposed to red. And then I looked this up. there are actually more registered Democrats in the state of Texas than it is Republicans by at least 7 to 10%. However, the Republicans are the ones that vote at a higher rate than the Democrats do in Texas. So the Democrats.
See,
Mhm.
let me interject something. One of the big problems we're having today is media. It used to be, before they had this type of media that they have now, that people had to get out there, present themselves to the public, and prove that they had what it took to do what they wanted to do. And people would say, "Yeah, I like that guy. He's done well. We know him." "Oh, you do? Tell me about him. We've dealt with him." And then see that spread. Nowadays, people are just nobodies, have absolutely no experience in the subject matter that they're going to have to deal with if they get elected. And they get out there on media and they've got a cause, an agenda that's a popular agenda, and they have celebrity status for the wrong things, and they get elected, and then they don't have a clue as to what they're supposed to do. People want term limits, but the truth of the matter is the typical elected official these days is termed out before they find out what they're supposed to be doing on the job, let alone learning it. So, by the way, that leads into your other one about the Fed that we were talking about. It's an early exemplar is when the subject matter gets beyond the ken of the elected official to handle. So you appoint a special unit to deal with complexities that you, supposedly in charge of the matter, don't have a clue as to what to do. And that is bad. And it evaporates the concept of common sense, because it used to be an ironclad requirement that if you wanted to survive this vetting process, you had to have some demonstrable common sense, which is not the case now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ron, they include anybody that happens to be in your state.
Well, California would lose like 5 seats if they did a fair census. And even beyond that, the Biden census gypped Florida of at least 1 seat. We only got 1 seat in the last census. Are you trying to tell me that Florida only had 1 seat in that? We should have had at least 2. Texas should have had another one. That could be the difference in the House of Representatives and the majority. So I would love for them to redo the census for 26. My legislature will redistrict those lines. We'll get it to where it's fair. But as it's right now, this country is not fairly apportioned. I've got so many more millions of people in Florida that have representation because of that flawed census.
Mr. President, I think it's going to do very well. A lot of people, I don't know if you've heard about it. It's like, it's captivated the country. Everybody wants it. It's going to get in. It's going to pass, and we're going to be around.
You know, it's a pragmatic matter, because the situation is something that's subject to the U.S. Constitution. And also, it's essentially up to the states, subject to review, to deal with how they draw the districts. It is up on the national level as to how many representatives a state gets. That is important, but how they come up with it is up to the states. It, as an alternative sentence, provides the opportunity to start a fight, which should be started. In other words, hey, you guys are cheating. We want to intervene on the state level to say Florida is entitled to 2, not 1, and California should lose 1 because. See, you want to start a fight, let's start one, and let's make it one that applies the rules so you can't cheat.
Right. Now, this here, there are millions of Republicans living in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont. And you know how many GOP seats they have in Congress? 0. Democrats have gerrymandered this country for decades, and now they're mad. Republicans are finally fighting back. I really do have to give the Republicans some credit, because, yeah, now you're at, It's been a long time that they allow, I look at it, the Democrats to just run all over them. And so now the Republicans, they're in it for the long haul. You know, Trump is already backing JD Vance for 2028. They're already looking to the midterms next year, which is very important, which is why, you know, he wants to do the census, the redistricting in Texas and so forth. So, yeah, you know, I think it's in gerrymandering to where no Republicans have a seat in these states. That, like, come on, I'm not an expert in this, but just looking at that is, you know, you could tell it's some type of corruption.
That's why they call it gerrymandering. The term comes from the observation by some newspaper editors way back that when they drew these strange districts, they weren't, you know, geometric shapes. They looked like a lizard, a salamander drawn so that you could include a lot of people from your particular party if you control the state legislative body, so you would get extra seats. So they would start up here, come down here, and drop down here. Like we have the 8th district in Tennessee, which extends from Memphis through rural areas, through other areas in a narrow corridor going up 70 some miles from Memphis to a certain area in Jackson, Tennessee. And then it's joined by 2 more congressional districts that extend out in weird patterns that way. So the party that was in power at the time was desirous of being able to control things. And then they chopped off a little area down here that is heavily concentrated, and it's mostly black. It's the 9th district, congressional district, and they've got a gay white Jewish guy who is the congressman for there because he ran as the sole gay white Jewish guy at a time when there were 14 black folk running for the position, and he got in on the primary, and the 9th district always votes Democrat. So he's been in for 19 years, and his net piece of legislation is a binding resolution that requires that the congressional cafeteria use nothing but paper straws, and that's what Memphis has gotten out of them. So it's pathetic in terms of its consequences.
Now, another thing, ICE is hiring.
Indiana.
Nice. Pardon me?
Why Indiana for this latest detention center?
Why not? I mean, bottom line is the state should play a role in this administration's efforts to remove public safety threats from this nation as quick as possible, illegal alien public safety threats and national security threats. States are playing a role. I'm happy. I'm happy for their participation, coordination, and efforts.
How quickly could we see it up and running?
I don't have exact deadline on it. I know it's we're looking about 1,000-bed facility, and I just, like I just said in another interview, I'd like to see more. I'd like to see bigger facilities that hold 4,000 or 5,000 people. Just creates more efficiencies. Near an airstrip, move people in and out quicker, bigger population, but 1,000 beds help. Right? I've said from day one, we need 100,000 beds. That's what we asked for in the big beautiful bill, and we got it. 100,000 beds will create more efficiencies and allow ICE agents to arrest more bad people on the street. And with us hiring at a massive rate, more boots on the ground, meaning we're arresting more criminals, which means we need more beds. Everybody arrests needs a bed. They're going to be in custody for several days, several weeks, several months, depending on the specific case. But the more beds we have, the more success we're going to see.
Do you have a cost?
See, it's about crime. If you flagrantly break the law, you're a criminal. There's no way around it. And see, you don't blame Trump, you blame Biden Harris for letting these people in. You've got Hamas, ISIS, Al Qaeda, Iran, China, and other places. They hate our guts. And they don't have B-2 bombers that could come over or get away with coming over and striking targets in the continental United States like we can them. So they got let in, invited in. Come on in, guys, with your backpacks full of military-grade explosives, detonators, and communications devices with your military training and acumen. Come on in. You don't have to sneak in You don't have to parachute in. You don't have to come in on a rubber boat from a submarine. You don't have to go hijack airplanes. You can come in, plant your explosives, go about your business. You don't have to commit suicide to actuate the things. You can just remotely flip the switch when you get the order and blow the devil out of something and make 911 in Pearl Harbor look like Boy Scout episodes. I mean, it is absolutely pathetic. You have got drug cartels, you've got sex trafficking cartels, you've got convicted murderers and thieves and drug dealers and perverts and all sorts of ne'er-do-wells that you've let in without vetting them. You don't know where they are. You violated American criminal law, which is specifically Title 8, Section 1324 of the United States Criminal Codes by aiding, abetting, advising, counseling, procuring, giving transportation, comfort, assisting, enabling the evasion of arrest and apprehension and detention and deportation. You've given them places to stay, provided money and transportation, and all of that is clearly designated as felonious under American law. And that is nothing new. It's been there for quite a few decades. So these people are flagrantly violating the law at the top, at the bottom, and people in this country are being compromised job-wise when it comes to security, when it comes to domestic safety. It's just a horrible thing, and they have gotten away with it, and people go, we're trying to be fair. Yeah, fool. Well, would you have tried to be fair and say, well, we need to take these guys who want to take this piloting school, and we need to help them because they want to blow up the Twin Towers. This is an American protest. Let's help them go to New York to ground zero and set these explosives so they don't have to kill themselves doing it. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good opportunity for the 300,000 Black women who are unemployed and Black people or whoever who need a job apply for a position in ICE because they are hiring and they're going to be employed for a while. So they're not going anywhere. And especially if they have a big budget coming out of that big, beautiful bill.
And they don't have a butt too big to turn around and run and do something physical because you do occasionally have to go through a physical struggle to apprehend somebody.
You don't have to be the ICE officers arresting people.
Well, we need more of those. It should be just like the Marine Corps. Everybody is trained as a rifleman. Even if you wind up doing clerical stuff, you can pick up the gun if you need to. We need folk that can go out and do the physical arrest, the collaring and the cuffing and bring folk in. That's what we need. And if you have some other use for them, then that becomes ancillary to the primary purpose
you need
have
more people to process the paperwork.
Yeah, but you don't. Yeah, but even the people who process the paperwork ought to be able to do the field work, and because that's where we have the shortages. It's not paperwork. Hell, you can use a computer to do most of the paperwork unless you set up programming is too stupid or clumsy. What you need is people to go do the collar, to go through the places of employment and say, you, and you, by law. You're supposed to be able to demonstrate your citizenship, your legal status to be here. Where is it? Boss, who did you bring in? Where are the papers for these people? We want to see them. And if not, then you're subject to prosecution. I know a lot of times I go places, and even now, I have to fill out forms to show that I am an American citizen or that I'm here legally in order to pick up some chump change because I spoke to somebody. So if I can do it, hell, they can do it too.
Well, I want to go here.
Nugs, point.
Let's go to the Federal Reserve.
That's what I was talking about earlier. Federal Reserve is an instrument set up because The thing with economics and finance got beyond the ken of your typical congressman who's supposed to be handling acquisition of funds and the disbursement thereof under the Constitution. They did not know enough to do this, even though that's their job. So they came up with this statutory scheme that allows basically a quasi-private corporation to control such vital things as interest rates and thereby dictate the state of the economy. I think it stinks to high heavens, and I think there needs to be some qualifications set for someone to hold an office that shows they are competent to do the business of the office rather than run dumb mouth, pushing a stupid or dysfunctional agenda, although that's their right under the First Amendment.
So it says President Trump has recently threatened the Federal Reserve independence. In the midst of this, the Supreme Court offered a few thoughts on why the Fed's independence may stand on different constitutional footing than other agencies. Critics argue that the court's distinctions are unprincipled or unprovoked, but the court's defense of the Fed's independence was both well founded and much needed. I want to play this clip here.
Point here.
Mhm.
I just shudder to think of some of the dumbasses like, say, Jasmine Crockett on a committee where they're trying to determine what the fit interest rate to be charged to general customers of banks is supposed to be. Can you see that? Or Maxine Wastewater or Cory Booker. Can you see what would happen? Or Nancy Pelosi or somebody like that, people who've made a career of crank ideologies being required. Well, maybe not Nancy Pelosi. She seems to have done better than anybody in the country, including the experts in working the stock market, and gotten a 400% increase in her wealth. And is worth, what is it, $473 million last count, and she gets a salary of less than $200,000 a year with benefits. Yeah. Well, let's take her out of the equation, but let's put in a few more of the people who are in the halls of Congress and see them trying to run the esoteric of high finance, lending, and credit in the banking system of the United States. It would be a disaster.
Could have gone either way, please.
Have you decided on a replacement for the Fed governor?
For Fed governor, I'll be making that decision before the end of the week, and we'll either decide on one for permanence or the 4-month period, the term. There's a term of about a number of months. We have a couple of candidates. Everybody wants it, okay? It's not a couple, but we've narrowed it to a couple of candidates. And we've also, we're looking at the Fed chair, and that's down to 4 people right now. Very good. Well, I can tell you, because I've already said there's 2 Kevins and 2 other people, okay?
He wants to get rid of Jerome, honey. And
Yeah.
he doesn't, I did know, but, and he wants the Federal Reserve to be federal controlled, not independent. Why is our Federal Reserve private? Independent?
Well, the theory was at the time they set it up, we wanted to be free from political control so that the primary driving engine is furtherance of the American economy rather than furtherance of somebody's sometimes selfish and narrow-minded political agenda. That's why you have the Hatch Act in civil service employment. They're not supposed to be involved in politics, and they go from one administration to the next, with the head being the political appointee, but the people that work there being civil service and immune from political repercussions for doing their job. It's a thing that started with the Mandarins way back in China 1,000 years ago.
So I also heard, because I have not brushed up on my Federal Reserve history, that because it's basically private banking, you may have, let's say, the Rockefellers, those big time wealthy bankers controlling or have a hand and say so in the Federal Reserve, which can lead to all types of corruption, basically.
Well, try this one. If you wanted to set up something to control professional basketball, wouldn't you have people like LeBron or Magic Johnson or former coach Jackson of the Lakers or some of the superstar basketball players, assuming they had commensurate intelligence to set up the rules as to how the game got played? And then somebody would say, well, you see, it's biased because they have all these famous players running the game. Well, if you are a famous player, you get to be famous because you could follow the rules, use them, and play the game. That's the same thing with finance. The Rockefellers, formerly the Carnegies and such like, they knew how to play the game. They were in on this. So, yeah, they kind of get in control of the game downstream when they've demonstrated an expertise to work it. That's just the way things go. You have a family. George Patton, famous general, probably one of the best we had. His father was a military officer. We have MacArthur, 5-star general. Douglas MacArthur, his father was a general. You have this kind of thing where you have families that have expertise. You've got John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr., you've got the whole Kennedy clan. You've got George Herbert Walker Bush, Prescott Bush, his daddy, a U.S. Senator. You've got George W. Bush. You've got Barack Obama, still part of the same family. You've got Dick Cheney, part of the same family, who was vice president. You got Sarah Palin, governor of Alaska, who's part of the same family. You have Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You've got Teddy Roosevelt. You've got Adams and Adams, who were presidents of the United States. You have these things that run in families because when they sit down at the dinner table, that's what they talk about. And you groom your child as you raise him or her, and they become expert in the subject, and they maybe have a blood interest in these kind of things. It happens. So that's the way it goes. Not saying that's the best thing, but it's unavoidable because, quite frankly, too many people would rather be entertained watching something silly on the big screen or the small screen than to sit down, sweat, and get eye aches and back aches leaning over a table while they read and study this stuff.
Mhm. So going back to the Supreme Court, it says when the Supreme Court offered a few words in defense of the Fed's unique independence in our constitutional system, in an unsigned procedural order a few months ago, it gave welcome reassurance to U.S. and international markets. Yet, the court statement was not welcomed by all. Some analysts criticize it as inconsistent with the court's own recent jurisprudence.
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 Prudence.
Prudence. Others, particularly Justin Elena Kagan, in dissent, wondered why the court's majority would opine on the Fed out of the blue. Are the courts?
Yeah, usually they won't unless they write a decision. They don't want to give guidance that kind of way. They want it as a clear statement of opinion in the law with a specific issue in front of them. Frankly, I have some problems with the whole proposition because Article 1 of the Constitution is pretty specific about who's supposed to have the purse strings in the United States government. And although they have the authority that is implied to hire, bring in expertise to deal with consultant matters and such like that, it is pretty much outside the spirit of what I read Article 1 being to actually turn the manipulation over to a private entity like the Fed rather than having the Fed come up with recommendations that are supposed to be approved or seconded or even rubber stamped by Congress. So it's kind of, I look at it this way. The president, as chief executive officer, is granted the enforcement authority. So he has to have his agencies and agents that carry out his instructions and orders. But when you come to a legislative function, them being able to have an enforcement agency or an agency that is effectively the executive agency over something with the authority to exercise power on their behalf, I think that delegation gets a little questionable. But pragmatically, the typical U.S. congressman is too damn stupid, ignorant, and ill-educated and ill-disposed to handle the matter. So it's sort of a catch-22 situation.
So let me just read this. It says Trump had fired each. No, was it this? Oh no. In Trump versus Wilcox, two recently terminated officials, Gwen Wilcox of the National Labor Relations Board and Kathy Harris of the Merit System Protection Board, filed a lawsuit against President Donald Trump seeking to be reinstated to their jobs. Trump fired each of them without making any effort to comply with the laws that limit a president's power to fire the NLRB's and MSPB's leaders except for good cause. What it says, NLRB members serve.
National Labor Relations Board.
Yeah, actually, let me make this bigger here so you can see it. Where was I?
You said they were challenging his authority to fire the head of the NLRB, etc.
The NLRB members serve a term of 5 years and can be removed for neglect of duty or malfeasance in office, but for no other cause.
That's wrongdoing in office, not stupidity or ignorance.
MSPB members serve for 7 years and can be removed only for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance.
In other words, inefficiency, you're doing the doggone thing wrong, which is causing problems. Now, that adds a little thing over and above what happens with NLRB. Malfeasance, again, is wrongdoing.
District judges blocked both firings, each invoking the 1935 landmark precedent.
What? Precedent. Not presa,
Okay.
Precedent.
Of Humphreys Executor versus United States, which created a major exception to the president's normal power to fire agency heads at will. Are you familiar with that 1935 landmark?
Yeah, that was so that they could see that was a problem. A lot of folk thought Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal was getting deep off into socialism and that the economy should be allowed to help itself out. But this was a situation when Social Security had just gotten set up. There were no safety nets. People were starving. And it was a horrible situation to have this huge depression that got brought about because of the conflict between the gold standard and getting off the gold standard. You got stuff like the Wizard of Oz because of the wonderful things he does. Wizard of Oz was supposed to be the governor of Kansas that supported the gold standard. The yellow brick road was the gold standard, but the problem is there's a finite amount of gold in the world. So when people increased their wealth, there was no gold to back it up, and the stock market was running on margin, which was This is what dollars are supposed to be, or how much gold and certificates or actual hard metallic gold is supposed to be used to back this up. So it was a real clumsy thing, and things were falling apart, and there was a battle over what was going to be done. So it was what it was, and we still haven't resolved all of that because nobody's looked at it these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So apparently, the Humphreys executor acknowledged the Constitution vests the executive power in the president alone. This vesting of power in him and the president's constitutional responsibility to take care that the laws be faithfully executed empowers him to fire executives officers at will. But crucially, the court added that this principle does not apply with the same force for federal agencies that are neither political or nor executive, but predominantly, how you pronounce this? Quasi judicial
Quasi judicial. See, here's what the problem is.
and quasi legislative.
See, the problem is that when they wrote the Constitution, they had no thought, no fantasy that government would become as complicated as it has become. Now, here is the big problem. The president under the Constitution is technically responsible for the outcome of all of this. So what you do is you say, hey, if you were the one, where the buck stops with you, you are ultimately responsible to the people for what happens. Then it's kind of screwed up if they say, but on the other hand, you have to work with these people that you are responsible for, but you can't control who's working for you. That kind of gets a little bit like, okay, I'm going to bust you if you don't do this job right. Okay, fine. I get to hire my assistants and I'm responsible for my assistants, but then somebody tells you, oh, no, 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 no. That's not going to happen. These are going to be your assistants. But wait a minute, these guys aren't good. Well, that's too bad. You'll be responsible for what they do, and you'll catch the hell because the buck stops with you, but you can't control who they are. See, that's what the problem is. It's that tension between the two sides. You want independence so that it's not too political, but you want somebody accountable, which means it has to be political, because if they're responsible for it, they ought to be able to call the shots as to who they pick to exercise their authority.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it just goes on here to say, which in Humphreys was how the court saw the Federal Trade Commission. The commission is to be nonpartisan, and it must, from the very nature of its duty, act with entire impartiality, the court wrote. Its members are called upon to exercise the trained judgment of a body of experts appointed by law and informed by experience. Thus, for the FTC and similar agencies, the court held Congress can enact laws allowing a president to fire the leaders only for good cause, save for inefficiencies, malfeasance, or neglect of duty, much to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's chagrin.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. See, here's this. Article 1, Section 8 sets forth a lot of this stuff. Also, things that are spread through the rest of the Constitution do too. They did not fall in the trap of trying to lay out a detailed recitation of exactly everything that was coming in. There are implications, and they took it that people would exercise common sense when they tried to carry these things out. So there is this thing about what is inferred as a power or appropriate authority. And that is subject to what used to be called the common law. In other words, what commonly develops when there is a necessity to regulate or handle or rule or set laws or determine outcomes. And we've kind of gotten away from that. We don't understand the concept of the wise man anymore because we've gotten away from it. And instead of wisdom, discernment, a vetting process of proof over the years and experience, we've replaced it with Walt Disney's "When You Wish Upon a Star, makes no difference who you are, your dreams come true, and you haven't been out of school 5 years, and you're supposed to be in charge of this massive thing." And you get Jasmine Crockett types. You get, what's the girl's name down in Georgia that was the probate court that just didn't know what she was doing and got removed for incompetence?
Oh,
Or
Judge, I can
Fannie Willis, where she comes in and she decides she's going to use it as a fief to get rich on, or Warnock with that slum across the road from his church, but is in a position to do something about it, but doesn't see that this kind of thing is what you have.
Okay. Thank you guys for tuning in to episode 24, 25, or 26 of Injustice for All with Judge Joe Brown. And we will see you next week.
And if you have absolutely nothing to do and you have no business, go back through what we've done and count them for yourself. Please don't let me know you've done that.